Live from Salt Lake City, this is Heart of the Matter, where we do all we can to worship God in spirit and truth. On part 2 with Ryan McKnight. If you didn't see part 1, you should watch it. You learn a lot about this man. He's fascinating, he's articulate, he's a great storyteller. He gives you insight into his life that isn't just perfunctory stuff. And I'm really looking forward to this next segment, because we're entering in what last week we talked about, Ryan, and just his growing up, and it's fascinating, and a little bit about his mission, a little bit about some spiritual experiences, getting married to a girl who served in his mission in Spain, having kids, and getting in the ward and being active. And now it brings us, I want you to introduce to us the first crack.
Yeah. Ooh.
What was the crack?
It wasn't a crack, it was a chasm.
Was it?
It was all came at once.
Oh, wow, that's unusual for let's hear it.
Well, so I have a sister who's the next sister below me, and she got married in a backyard here in Utah by the bishop, not in the temple, to a returned missionary. And, you know, it was kind of one of these things like don't ask, don't tell. Like, you know, we knew they didn't go to church, but nobody was talking, you know. Yeah. And they never, you know, and even to this day, they're not the kind of people to go around talking about why they left the church. So we just kind of thought they're inactive, you know. Her husband, who's a super cool guy, but you know, I didn't really know him at the time, and he's super smart. PhD, and he was in a PhD program at the time. And it was kind of this like underlying assumption, he's like too smart for his own good or something. He thinks he's smarter than everybody else, which by the way is not true about him. But this must be why he's not going to church. And, you know, my wife was, you know, pretty close to my sister actually. And so they would frequently talk on the phone from time to time. And it wasn't like blatant, you know, why aren't you going to church? But it was kind of like very passive mission, you know, hey, you should, have you gone to the new church and you're new where you just moved and, you know, whatever. And then my wife would hear things like through the grapevine, like in the gossip, you know, I wouldn't really get involved in that stuff. And she would come to me and she'd say, you know, something about polygamy. But we didn't really know what it was. And I had this whitewashed, you know, version of polygamy in my head. And while I thought it was like kind of weird, I was like, makes sense to me. I mean, I don't see any problem with it. You know, I wasn't like signing up, but at the same time, I was like, okay, it had to happen, right? And this came up a couple of times. Not that my wife was bothered by it. Like, it was just like we couldn't understand why somebody would leave the church over polygamy. And I would even say to my wife, I said, that's just an excuse. That's not really why they don't go to church. They're just saying that as an excuse. If they're even saying that at all. Because this was like third, fourth hand information. So finally one day I said, you know, my wife keeps asking, it keeps coming up, and I said, you know, let me see, why would a person leave the church over polygamy? So I Googled something to that effect. And at some point, I mean, I'm looking at this stuff and, you know, these websites that are like, you know, not even well designed, so there's no credibility in my mind. But I read something about like, you know, Joseph Smith married 14-year-old girls or something, right? So, and I'm like, well, he must have read these lies on the internet and believed them, right? This is what I'm thinking must have happened. And I notice that there's a citation. And I followed the citation. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I guess I was wrong about that. Joseph Smith did marry 14-year-old girls, or a 14-year-old girl, whatever. If I was wrong about that, what else am I wrong about? And the rabbit hole opened up, and within a matter of days, I was neck deep. Mormon Think, I think, was like the main website that I had found. And I'm like, I'm not just reading Mormon Think. I am like following every citation to the original source wherever possible. And if there's no original source, I'm just like dismissing. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. How have I never heard this before?
Wow.
This can't be true. I thought that I was well versed in church history. And looking back, I now know that I was very versed in correlated history. But I didn't even know that there was such a thing as correlated history. I had heard correlation department. I just thought the correlation department was the people that wrote the manuals, which is true. But I mean, I didn't realize it was more sinister than that. I didn't realize it was the whitewash department. So I'm like racking my brain for like a week or two, consuming everything. And it just so happens that I'm thinking I'm recognizing that this stuff has sources cited, but I'm also thinking there must be like an explanation. I just haven't found it yet. It's going to say, yes, this is all true, but this is why it makes sense. And it just so happens that my 10-year anniversary was coming up. And I had already had these plans that I had put in place before all this. And I'm reading online about all these people whose wives find out about this and give them ultimatums. And I kind of thought my wife fit that mold because she was the spiritual anchor of the family, if anybody was never going to leave the church, it was definitely my wife. And so I was afraid of that. And we got our anniversary, and I'm like, why am I going to ruin this? And so we go on the anniversary. And in fact, because my anniversary was just the other day, and I had this memory pop up on Facebook from that dinner. Wow. And I showed my wife, I said, look, that was a great dinner that night. But that whole time, I had this thing brewing inside that I hadn't told you about. And after that, I'm like, okay, now how do I tell her? I still didn't want to. We were building a house at the time, our first house.
Vegas?
In Vegas, it was like, we were under contract and everything, and it was like, I figured I was going to get divorced, and I didn't want to get divorced, and I didn't want to lose this house, and then I thought, oh, well, maybe if I wait till we get into the house and I kind of slow burn it, and then if we get divorced, I make enough money to pay for the house. I'm, thinking irrationally, and so then, like a week after that anniversary dinner, while this is all going through my brain, and by the way, I have not decided the church isn't true yet, but there's issues that need to be addressed, and it's consuming me. We were in, I believe it was a week after the anniversary dinner, and we were at church, and we were in the overflow that Sunday, and when everybody went their separate ways for Sunday school, we were having some conversation. It had nothing to do with any of this, but whatever the conversation was, we ended up in this overflow by ourselves. And there was kind of this moment of silence in the conversation, and I just felt overcome with this feeling, I just can't hold this in anymore. Because, look, everybody's told lies in their life, including myself, but I'm not a liar. Like, I don't live a lie, and I couldn't keep doing this, And I said, I got to tell you something. And I said, I think the church might not be true. And immediately she started crying. And I'm like, oh, what is this? What are you talking about? I said, listen, and this is, I think smartphones were out, but I didn't have one. So I couldn't pull anything up, I said, look, when we get home, I will show you what I'm talking about. I don't want to get into a whole big thing here in the last, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. And we talked what we could for the last 2 hours. Like, we ended up going out on the couch and spending those 2 hours out on the couch in the church. And to her credit, never once was divorce on the table because of any of this stuff.
Good woman.
And she also, to her credit, a lot of times if divorce isn't on the table, they'll put blinders on and just not want to hear, And she didn't do that either. She still maintained a testimony because I think she still had an emotional attachment to a lot of the things of the church. But she 100% recognized all of these historical issues as serious problems and valid reasons to stop believing. And like I said, we were building a house, and now at this point, we're like, 4 to 5 weeks away from, getting the keys. And we've been in this ward for 8 years and have true, what we believed, at least at the time, true friends. And I'm in the young men's presidency, and I haven't even decided the church isn't even true yet. So how do I deal with this? And we went to my bishop, our bishop, and I said, listen, I don't know what to do. I've been reading some things online. And he immediately stopped me. Ryan, you need to repent. Oh. You need to stop reading online right now. You need to get your scriptures out. You need to repent. never once let me even speak one of the concerns. And looking back on it now, like, he's such a nice guy, and I think a good guy probably. I just don't think he's not prepared for that. You know, it's not his fault. He didn't know how to react. And about a week or two after that, right before we moved, we didn't tell anybody, and I don't know if he told anybody, but we were not telling anybody that I was going there. We're like, okay, you know what? We're moving to another stake. We're moving far enough away that we're in a new stake. And I'll figure out what I'm going to do then. And in the meantime, again, we're still waiting for our house. It's after talking to the bishop, but before moving into the new house. Kind of this final last-ditch effort. I had reached out to my mission president, Shane Bowen, who was also my wife's mission president. And First Quorum is 70. I have a ton of respect for this guy, still do to this day. I mean, you know, as much as I have many problems I have with the church, I have a soft spot for him. He was gracious enough to spend 2 hours with us on Skype. And I had sent him a bunch of concerns of mine, and he said he read them, and I think he did. You know, a bunch of major concerns, you know, race, Book of Mormon historicity, polygamy, rock in the hat, which, by the way, a lot of the Mormons think, well, you know, what's so bad about it? It's not the rock in the hat. It's the fact that it was hidden.
Yeah.
All right, that's what they can't figure out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And we went through every concern, and he knew about all of them except for maybe like one. I remember. I seem to remember one issue where he was like, you know, never heard of that one. But basically, he knew everything. Now, I found out later, I didn't know this at the time, but I found out later, he was the head of the correlation committee at that time. Wow. Now, this is before the first race in the priesthood essay. And he told us, and this was about 6 months before the first essay, 4, 5, 6 months. He said, you know, the church is going to address some of these issues soon. Try to hold on until then. I didn't know he was talking about these essays that were imminent, that I'm sure he had a part in at least approving. And in the very end of this conversation, now my wife is going into this conversation with questions too, but she is much more of a believer than I am at this point. I'm not a believer, but I am like this close to being an ex-Mormon at this point. And I remember my wife asked something like, you know, when he said he knew about the rock in the hat since he was a little kid. And my wife said to him, how could you have let us teach a different story on our mission? Ooh. My wife said that to him. Wow. And I don't remember what he said. But, I mean, it wasn't anything satisfactory. It wasn't anything that helped her understand that, you know. But at the very end of it all, this is how he ended it. Ryan, from what I can tell, you've done great research. I can't dispute anything you've sent to me or we've talked about today. I have no reason to dispute any of it from a factual basis. There are no answers to these questions. The only answer is that will come through the Holy Ghost and testify to you that the church is true. And I said to him, now it just so happens that the week before we were in church and somebody gets up and gives a talk and had something to do with faith and read from the definition of faith in the Bible dictionary, you know, the Bible dictionary being the one that the Mormons publish. And so it was fresh in my mind. I said, President, I can respect what you're saying, but that doesn't work for me anymore. And I said, let's open up our scripture. It was one of these things, you know, let's open up our Bible dictionary to the, and I told her, last week this lady got up and read this. And I was like this in my chair at church, you know, whatever. And it was one of these, I was like this when she read it. And, you know, people can go and read, I'll paraphrase it because I don't have it memorized. But I believe it's the second paragraph in the definition. And it says something to the effect of, true faith requires correct knowledge. Yeah. Something along these lines. Yeah. And I said to him, that doesn't mean you have to know everything. But the things that you do know, that you base your testimony, that you base your faith on, have to be correct. And up to this point in my life, I think at the time I was 32. For 32 years, I have based my testimony on incorrect information. And when I reevaluate my faith with the correct information, which you are confirming to me, I can't do it. And this was a big moment for us because me a little bit, my wife more, was convinced. I thought it was a possibility. My wife really thought this would happen. That not that he would answer our questions, but that he would say, the answers are out there. Let me get back to you in a couple of days. We thought that was going to happen. That didn't happen. He just straight up said, there's no answers to these questions of yours. And I just said, I can't have faith under those circumstances, not in the Mormon church. It doesn't. So it wasn't the final straw for my wife, but I think it was for me. It's one of these things, people that have left the church understand this. There wasn't like a day where I woke up and I said, okay, today I'm an ex-Mormon. Right? It's one of these gradual things where it dwindles and dwindles and dwindles till all of a sudden you realize, hey, yeah, I don't believe anymore. But I can't necessarily pinpoint. But this was definitely the end of the end.
Got
it. My belief didn't last much longer after that. And we moved into our new stake, and I said to my wife, I said, look, this is what we're going to do. We don't know anybody here, and so we don't have this baggage of having friends and stuff that we have in this other ward. So I'll go to church with you, because, the boys at that point they weren't even old enough to be in nursery, So I'll go to sacrament meeting with you, and then while you go to class, I'll sit out in the hallway and take care of the boys. I'm not going to tell anybody the churches, I'm not going to go evangelizing, but if anybody asks me, I'm not a member. I'm walking into this as a non-member. Okay? And my wife agreed to it, So we do that for like 2 or 3 weeks. No more than 3 weeks. And on that last week, I don't remember if it was a testimony meeting or if it was a talk, but this guy gets up and starts bearing his testimony about Joseph Smith, using every superlative in the book. He's the greatest this and the most wonderful that, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, I had a panic attack. I couldn't breathe. I started shaking. I couldn't take it. It was hitting me so hard. I think this is what Mormons don't understand. They think it's like, oh, I'm free, I left the church. It's not like that. The process was so painful that it was physical pain, even though it was mental.
Wow.
It hurt physically. And then this was one of those times, and I couldn't breathe, and we went home that day, and I said, I can't do it. I can't go. I can't do it. I told her what happened. And she was feeling some of that too, because even though she was still finding reasons to believe in the church, she knew that Joseph Smith was not what we thought he was. And so she also was somewhat bothered, not as much as I was at the time, but she was recognizing these things as well. And so our agreement at that, I said, I can't go, but I will stay home with the boys, and I will have the house cleaned and dinner ready when you come home. I buttered it all up, and she agreed, I'm sure I held my end of the bargain. She ended up, even though there was no divorce talks, there was a lot of fighting over this because I wanted her to leave the church. Yeah. And she didn't want me to force her to leave the church. And I think we got to a point, I don't remember when exactly, but we got to a point where it was like, okay, I'm going to leave you religiously, I'm going to leave you alone, and you're going to leave me alone. And at that point, it was a matter of weeks or short months that she was out on her own.
That's so important for people to hear.
Yeah,
they want to force the spouse.
Yes, you can't. No. People, if they're going to leave, they're the ones that have to do it. Yeah. You can leave the door open. Hey, I'm always here, but you can't force them to walk through that door.
How about the older girls?
Well, my oldest daughter was baptized about a week or so before my fateful Google search. I baptized her. My other kids, my boys don't even have any memory of the church, other than the few times that I could probably count on one hand that they've gone with my parents. So their notion of church, my boys, is like they go and get candy once in a while. Once a year they go with my parents and get candy at church. My oldest daughter, I don't know. She remembers. My other daughter, I remember my second daughter, who at the time I think was 5, and she had just seen her older sister get baptized. I remember her being upset that she wasn't going to get baptized, but she was upset for like a day and it never came up again.
Yeah.
My kids do not miss church. And I live in, living in Las Vegas, we don't have, even though I'm sure there's a lot of Mormons at their school, there's so few that they have plenty of friends. Sure. And some of their friends might even be Mormons. I really don't know. But I mean, the friends that I do know, I don't think are. But they don't have the problem that sometimes people encounter here in Utah, where all of a sudden all their friends are like turning their backs on them. That was never an issue.
Yeah.
So for them, it's been, I believe, pretty easy.
Good. So you had this, your wife 2 or 3 weeks later does it, the kids are okay. When does Ryan McKnight become Ryan McKnight?
Oh, Mormon Leaks, Ryan
yes,
McKnight? Years later.
Years? How many years?
Well, I guess you could say it sort of started with the November policy.
Okay.
November of 2015. I was, some people know this, some people don't. I had a very minor role in that leak.
Okay, so tell our audience about that.
So I was in a private Facebook group. I was very active on social media, in Reddit especially, ex-Mormon, because even though my wife had left the church, my wife left the church in a way where she did not like to talk about it. It was too painful. I had nobody to talk to. So Reddit was my outlet. I was very active on Reddit. A lot of your viewers who know me probably know me from Reddit. I'm not really there anymore, but I was Fearless Fixer on Reddit was my handle. Very, very active. And I was also active in all these private Facebook groups here and there. Now, there was this one particular group that I found my way into that was geared towards ultra-conservative right-wing Mormons. And which I was for a many number of years. I don't know that I was ever an ultra right-wing conservative. I was definitely conservative Mormon, and I was starting to see some things more liberal, although I still have a lot of conservative ideologies that I still hold on to. But I was definitely much more liberal than I was as a member. But, this group was very entertaining because they were off the charts, like out there. You know what I mean?
Like John Birch?
Yes, exactly. In the worst possible definition of John Birchers. Okay. So it was me, and there was like 1 or 2 other people in there that were like ex-Mormon or liberal, and so we would like, and they knew it. We didn't like pretend, but we would like push their buttons, and we were like their whipping boys, and we would, sometimes people would find their way in the group like us, but they would like cross lines and get kicked out. We always knew how to ride that line of pushing their buttons but not getting kicked out. So one of the people that was in there that was kind of like me, although he wasn't full-blown ex-Mormon at the time, I think he was still going to church, but he's definitely sort of on the ex-Mormon side of the spectrum and liberal side of the spectrum. And he makes a post and he goes, "Hey, what do you guys think about this? A friend of mine just told me that the church is now, whatever, the November policy." And I'm like, I don't remember exactly how he described it. And I'm like, there's no way this is true. This has got to be some miscommunication. The church would never do this. So I went to Reddit and to John DeLynne's Mormon Stories Facebook group, which was huge and still is, and posted, I just copied and pasted. I said, has anybody heard of a new policy like this? Little did I know, I just stumbled across this brand new secret policy that they tried to roll out without telling anybody. John DeLynne, it blows up on, so I was the first person to post it to a wide audience, okay? It went viral. John DeLynne contacts me, says, where did you hear this from? I said, I told him the guy's name. I don't know this guy, contact him. So John DeLynne took over from that point. I was out. He goes, gets the memo that KUTV ended up publishing, and the rest is history. Now, the guy that was my source, if you will, that I told John DeLynne, hey, this guy. At the time, because he was still going to church and things were sensitive, I think, with the family, maybe, whatever, he did not want to be public. Like, because people were saying to, I think people were saying to John, hey, tell this guy we'd love to interview him.
Got it.
But he was not interested in his name being out there at the time. He's since come out, by the way. His name's Aaron Brown. A lot of people know because he wrote a blog post about it a couple years later. But at the time, he wanted to be anonymous. So, and I didn't care if I was anonymous. I could have cared less. And so John went on to Reddit, and because I was his source, my source wanted to be anonymous, but I was sort of John's. So John went on to Reddit and said, I want to thank, all this craziness today. I just want to shout out to Fearless Fixer, who was my source.
Wow.
So for a long time, I became dubbed. They called me the Leaker, was my nickname on Reddit, which I hated, by the way, because I wrote a big post like, guys, like, okay, I did play a role in this.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to have played a role in this, but I'm not the leaker. Like, I was literally in the right place at the right time. And had I not been there, this was going to get out some way.
Yeah.
I just happened to be.
Yeah.
As soon as he posted it, I immediately put it on, just the first one.
Yeah.
But, what happened is every once in a while, people mostly on Reddit would contact me and they'd be like, oh, hey, hey, I got this or I got that. And most of the time it was nonsense.
Did you have to vet the information?
Well, it wasn't even vettable information sometimes. It was just
okay.
like, I heard this and I heard that. I was like, and then sometimes when somebody would have a document, it was not as big of a deal as they thought it was.
Okay.
It was just like, well, what do I care about this?
Yeah.
I think there was one thing during that period of time that I thought was cool and I put it online. But even looking back, it was minor. So, but people would contact me, like maybe on average, like once a month, I'd get somebody would contact me. This culminated in October, basically a year later, in October of 16. I get contacted by a guy on Reddit, says, listen, I've been sitting on these 15 videos that I have for years, and I've always been looking for a way to get these out there without my name being attached to it. If you want, you'll put them on YouTube. I said, sure, why not? And it's conference weekend in October of 16. So he sends them to me on Saturday. He was like, oh, it would be really cool, like if they went up right before the first session Sunday morning. I'm like, all right. So I'm like, some of these things are like, there's 15 videos, which people can go to Mormon Leaks YouTube page and watch them. Some of them are over an hour long. I couldn't watch that. I watched all the 5-6 minute videos, and they were like, I thought at the time, I was like, okay, they're interesting. Like, I thought like the ex-Mormons were going to eat it up, because there was some really interesting stuff from an ex-Mormon perspective. But, I didn't really think much more than that. And the reason why is because the most significant video was one of the hour-long ones, and I didn't watch it. So I didn't realize the gem that was in these things. So I upload them Saturday night with a scheduled release, whatever, an hour before a conference. And that Sunday morning, my wife and I had already had this planned brunch at a friend's house who was just leaving the church. And so we were going to have this engaging sort of conversation about our newfound freedoms and all this stuff. And so I turned my phone off and we were at these people's house for several hours. And I remember telling them, I was like, hey, you guys, when I leave, you guys got to go check these videos out that I put online. I remember telling them. And I think I even pulled one of the videos up. But, I didn't notice all the views it was getting. I just pulled one of them up and said, yeah, these videos, you can check them out. They're funny. Here's a funny one, this and that. So I get, either out to my car or when I got home, whenever it was I turned my phone on. I had over all platforms, email, Reddit, Facebook, all this. I had over 1,000 notifications. I was like, what was in those videos? Huh. And it turns out, there were a lot of things, with, just glaring out of touchness on LGBT issues, on drug issues. There's this one where they're talking about medical marijuana, and they're talking about marijuana as if it's the same thing as meth. I think it was either Ballard or Packard at one point. Packer, one of those two guys at one point was like, yeah, I hear, these housewives are cooking on their stovetops these days. And I'm like, what? Even Breaking Bad makes it look harder than that. You know what I mean? It's like, they were so out of touch, and then apparently the one that really got people's attention was this video with this guy. What these videos were, for those that haven't seen them, is there's a weekly meeting of the 12, not the 15. This is just the 12 apostles. And they're being briefed on something by somebody, okay? Some issue. They're being briefed, and there's a Q&A. And there'll be the person briefing them, and then there will be some invitees in the background that maybe there's some cross interest or whatever, So this one video is this guy, at the time of the video, he was a recently former senator. He had just left office, U.S. senator, out of Oregon, named, what was his name, Ethan?
Jordan.
Gordon Smith.
Okay.
Gordon Smith, senator out of Oregon, just left office. And he's coming in to debrief the 12, on his time in office, And he's like, the person, first of all, I don't remember if it was him or the person who introduced him. There was some mention of his staff being church broke, And there was even where it was said, like, there were times where we didn't hear back from the church for weeks and we didn't know what to do. Basically saying that they didn't do anything until the church sort of approved it. Yeah. And the interesting thing about this, by the way, is that, if he was a Utah senator, you could probably make the case, well, his constituents are mostly Mormon, so they probably already agree, what's the big deal? But this is a senator from Oregon. Wow. I mean, I got to believe that his constituency was some like 1% Mormon or something. And here he is taking marching orders from the church and admitting to it. And he's talking about this in like, hey, we had a great time type of thing. Debriefing. Wow. This is what we did the last however many years he was in the Senate. I don't know. But one of the things that he said also was he talked about how he voted for the Iraq War because he felt like if they could bring democracy to Iraq, that was a very fertile ground for the church's missionary department. Now, and I remember I pointed out at the time, I said, I think I said this in one of the interviews. I said, even if you're a supporter of the Iraq War, I think you would agree that that's not a reason to go to war. Yeah. So it was a real problematic. So that, I was giving interviews everywhere, culminating with, like a week later, like an interview with the New York Times.
Wow.
They did a whole story, mostly about the Gordon Smith video, but they touched on all the videos, and they had a picture of me in front of the Las Vegas temple.
Wow.
Yeah. And so now, I'm not this obscure Redditor that John DeLynn thanked, that only some people know about, getting contacted once a month. I am now being bombarded with people contacting me. And it's like, okay, I got to get serious or piss or get off the pot, right? And, there was one particular potential leak that I really wanted, and the leaker obviously was concerned about anonymity, and I was just like, well, I'm going to build a website, although I didn't really have solidified plans. It was kind of like, if you build it, they will come. And, started building a team of people because I don't know I don't know computers. Ethan Dodge, who runs the site in its current form with me today, was also the first person to be on the team, and he's here today. We had a couple of other people. There was a guy that was consulting with Ethan on some of the more technical matters on the back end of the website. There was a guy who was designing the website, the aesthetics of it. And there was a guy, they were all anonymous, including Ethan at the time. And the only person involved who was public, including myself, was a guy named Scott Fawcett. Some people know he's pretty active on social media. And so, he and I were kind of the public faces of it. I mean, I was the founder of Mormon Leaks, and it was my brainchild. But I mean, I want to be very clear, this website would not have happened if I tried to do it by myself.
Oh, sure, I get that.
And we launched in December, I think it was December 19th of 2016. We had no guarantee that anything was going to come through. We got lucky that there was a bunch of media interest in our site without even having published anything yet. I mean, other than the 15 videos from October, we got a lot of media coverage even without having published anything. And one of the very first things that came through the wire and ended up being our very first leak was the pay information on the apostles, which was, I believe, and I have not been fact checked on this. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Nobody's corrected me on this, so I believe I'm accurate in saying this. We are the first people to definitively prove any amount of pay for them since they stopped reporting their finances in whatever year in the 50s or whatever it was.
Wow.
So, to have actual proof.
So let me ask you really quickly, Ryan, your team built the site, and the site's purpose is to kind of warehouse, clearinghouse information so the party who gives it to you is protected.
Yeah, and that, by the way, I just would like to be clear, that was the original purpose, and it still kind of is, but we have shifted, which we can talk about a little bit. But, we have evolved. But yes, originally, the way the site was set up, it was simple. You go on there, hit submit, You follow the instructions, and if you follow those instructions, I will not know who you are.
Oh, okay.
Unless you go out of your way to tell me who you are.
Okay.
But if you want to be completely anonymous, you can. And so some of our biggest leaks, I know who this leaker is. Some of them, I have no idea.
Amazing. So that kind of terrifies me just hearing it, because what do you do when you get something, you don't know who's giving it to you, and how can you authenticate it?
We have always been very protective of our authentication process.
Okay.
And a lot of times when I say that, it makes it sound very mysterious, just like when you say you work for the CIA. And in reality, it probably isn't as mysterious as that if I were to really lay it out. But we don't like to get into that just to protect our sources and things. But I will say this. We have never published a document without taking serious and extensive looks into their authenticity. Okay? And could we ever publish something and guarantee 100% that it's real? Nobody can do that. But we never published anything unless we had good. If you sent me a document, it wasn't just getting published.
Yeah.
Okay? That's not what we were.
Right.
Okay?
You're not just out there to slam. You want...
How individual documents got vetted is not something I'm going to go into at this time.
Okay.
But I'll just say I probably don't have a lot of talents, but I do have a talent in cultivating sources and relationships of trust. And I have sources everywhere.
Awesome.
Everywhere.
So we have the videos, and then we have the pay of the apostles.
Right.
And what was, for our audience, most revolutionary about that? What did it prove? I don't know.
Well, first of all, I want to be clear that it didn't prove all of their pay.
Okay.
We only were able to show what their base pay was. Which we know whenever they say base pay, which that was the language being used, we know there's a plus, and probably a couple more pluses on top of that.
Sure.
But in 2000, I believe we had a lot of pay information. Some of it was old, so out of date. The most recent pay information that we published was a memo from 2014 that was informing a member of the 70, which, by the way, the church subsequently came out in a statement and said everybody from the 70 on up to the prophet received the same base pay. Okay? So this was a memo to a member of the 70 informing him of what his cost of living adjustment was for the year, going from X number of dollars, I think it was 114 to 120, rough. So in 2014, the base pay was $120,000. And then I'm sure they get cost of living adjustments every year. So it's probably in the 150 to 160 range at this point, because they get a very healthy cost of living. I mean, that year it was a very healthy cost of living adjustment.
Wow.
Percentage-wise. So assuming they get that same thing every year, you're looking in the 150 range probably today, maybe even a little more than that for their base pay.
Right.
And on top of that, there's, depending on what their duties are and all that kind of stuff, they get other things. So look, here's what's interesting about that leak. You have, in any type of warring factions, you have extremists on both ends, right? Including ex-Mormons, right? And so on the extreme end of Mormonism, it's all lay clergy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, which is what I believed, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I believed that those top guys, were only reimbursed for their living expenses, and that any vacations they were taking was out of their own, built-up retirement funds.
Yeah.
So on the extreme end, you have everyone as lay clergy, including the prophet. And on the extreme end of ex-Mormons they're making $10 million a year.
Yeah.
Okay? So we debunked both of those camps. Okay? And I think we started a conversation that was not happening because it couldn't happen, because it was all speculation before then. It was like, let's say if I would have even guessed right and said, they probably make, between $100,000 and $200,000. A Mormon would just simply say, no, they don't, and you don't have proof.
Yeah.
Well, look, they're right.
Right.
So for the first time, we had a basis, and conversations were happening that had never happened before. And people were saying, well, okay, here's what my takeaway is. First of all, if somebody wants to say it's too much money, that's fine. If somebody wants to say, like the Mormons like to say, oh, well, you know, it's not a lot of money when you think about it, fine, whatever. Here's what I say. Can we all just at least agree that it's not a modest stipend, which is what they claimed it was all that time?
Beautiful.
So that's what I say we've discovered, that they don't receive a modest stipend. And we started a conversation. With a lot of our leaks, that's what happened. Conversations that have never been happening happened. We had the bubble chart that people refer to, which was shortly after that. You know, this enemies list that had, you know, these John DeLynn and Kate Kelly, and it had a right-wing side of it. It had Denver Snuffer, and pornography was in the middle because everybody, I guess, you know, is affected by that. And, you know, all these threats to the church, and you know that got a lot of media attention because that was the first time the church tried to take legal action against us. They made a copyright claim and basically said, if you don't take it down, we're going to sue you, was basically the gist of it. And we had our attorney write them a letter to tell them to go pound sand. Wow. Again, that was the gist of it. And we kept it up. And of course, they haven't sued us.
Wow.
Yeah.
But so how is it not a copyright infringement?
Because our argument then and today is that we're journalists. This is newsworthy, and it falls under fair use. Okay, and now I'm not being as eloquent about that explanation as our attorney was. I mean, he cited, you know, laws and all this stuff to back it up. We have it published on our website, the letter our attorney wrote, if people want to go and read it. But you know, they made that was a huge mistake for them, because up to that point they had really not acknowledged anything that we had published. You know, so it's kind of like, you know, if they don't talk about it, the members aren't hearing about it as much. And, you know, it's kind of like, you know, if no one's saying it, then it doesn't exist. And now all of a sudden, you know, there was a big question. How do we know to believe all these documents? Well, here we have a document that actually, on the face, would have been the easiest document to forge of everything we had published to that point. Because it had no, like, church fonts. It was like a PowerPoint presentation that you or I could have created. And here they are validating it as real, claiming copyright on it. So it validated us. Wow. And now people are like, oh, these guys are like legit. And we got a lot of submissions after that. You know, one of our biggest things that we got was a treasure trove. I don't remember how many documents it ended up being, somewhere in the range of like 50 files of unpublished works of Bruce R. McConkie.
Wow.
Yeah. How many was it? Oh, was it 90? 90. And some of them, I haven't read all of them, but some of them are fascinating. There's one, Shawn. It is a must read for everybody. It is his own personal account, like a journal entry type of thing, of when they lifted the ban on black people. Wow. And it's not like, his account like, oh, well, this is how I felt. It's a mechanical timeline. Wow. First we did this, then we did this, then we did this, then we did this. Wow. Unbelievable. I had a historian come up to me at Sunstone after we published that and said, I've always heard that document existed and never have seen it before.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This is on the site.
It's on our website. It's called, if you Google Mormon Leaks, the McConkie Papers, we have a wiki entry called the McConkie Papers with all of them there. So that's one.
Seth, we'll have a graphic for it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and so that one is fascinating. There's another one. A lot of these things were like early manuscripts to maybe books that he might have eventually published, just never got around to it, or talks that never got given, or whatever stuff like. Most of it was like that stuff. There was this one thing that never got published, and what it looked like, it was, I don't know if it was going to be a book or if it was going to be like a long form article in the Ensign, something like that, where he was answering questions that he had received from people over the years. And one of the questions was something to the effect of, you know, where do animals come from? Or, you know, if we're eternal, are animals eternal? Something along those lines was the question. And here is his answer. His answer is that animals, just like we are the children of resurrected beings, Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, I suppose, animals are also the offspring of resurrected animals. And then he goes further. He says, for example, The first cow on the earth came from resurrected cows that lived in other worlds.
Oh my gosh, I've never heard of this in my life.
Nobody has. This was something that we published that nobody is, other than very few people who have been given access to this database, which it turns out apparently is owned by the family. That whoever the heirs are, they also threatened to sue us if we didn't take the documents down. They made a copyright claim almost identical to the one that the church made, and we sent their letter almost identical to the one that the church, we sent to the church, and we have them still up and they have not sued us. So this is what one of the things that comes up a lot. This is why Mormons shouldn't be afraid of our site. Nothing on our site, with the exception of one or two things probably, are inherently damaging to the church. Yes, can everything on our site be used to argue against the church? Sure. But you could almost everything argue also in favor of the church. And this thing with the McConkie documents, listen, it's no secret that McConkie was out there with his ideas, right? And, as crazy as this, cow thing is, I mean, I don't think anybody's shocked that McConkie had these views. So it's like, what's the big deal? And like, it just, another insight into me. And this summary of what happened when they lifted the ban is everybody needs to read this. It's a piece of history. I remember reading that one and just being on the edge of my seat the whole time I read it.
I bet.
And it has nothing to do with bashing the church, that document. It is there's nothing in that document. Like, he doesn't say, oh, I wish we didn't have to do this, or nothing. There's nothing controversial in the document.
But it gives
it's one of the best documents I think we have.
Wow. What, so to date, do you have a count on documents?
I don't
No,
know.
but it's large.
Hundreds.
Wow. And has anything just blown your mind besides these that you haven't already mentioned? That,
Man, I don't know. That's tough.
is it?
McKenna Denson tape was big for us,
What do you think of that thing now?
Well, yeah, I thought that might come up. I don't know. We knew that there was credibility issues from day one.
Yeah.
We knew a lot of things that maybe the public didn't know about her. We tried to always give her the benefit of the doubt, that a lot of her antisocial behavior in her past was, born out of the trauma that she suffered in her life and, things like that. But we knew that there was always a possibility that she was lying. Now, by the way, I don't necessarily think she is lying about Joseph Bishop.
Yeah.
But we always recognized that there was a possibility that she had somehow, heard this guy was creepy with people and crafted a story or whatever, right? But what we couldn't get past, before we published it, we sat down and we said, okay, let's say worst case scenario, she's 100% a liar. We still have Joseph Bishop admitting to being inappropriate with other women.
Yeah.
So if people go back and look at our headline and what we published, it's almost nothing about McKenna. Huh. It's all about former MTC president admits to being inappropriate with multiple women.
Oh, wow. Smart.
Because we already knew this. Now, when I say we knew this, that doesn't mean I thought McKenna Denson was a liar from day one.
Right.
Nor am I saying I think she's a liar today. But we knew that there were credibility issues. And we knew there was reasonable, and especially as things unfolded quickly, I mean, we might not have known everything about her when we published, but we knew enough to know there was a worry. And shortly after we published, we knew the whole thing. I've had the dossier since almost day one, the infamous dossier. I spoke to her right when I got the dossier. I went point by point. She admitted to me, yes, I did that. Yes, I did that.
So,
but like I said, we tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, as say, look, I mean, when you suffered abuse, not just by Bishop, but she was abused, I believe, by her stepfather, and when she was a kid, and so nobody's listening to her all these years, and some people are going to lash out in antisocial ways. And now she's being heard, and she seems to have turned a new leaf. So we were trying to give her the benefit of the doubt in that sense. Now, again, a lot of people, they associate us with McKenna Denson because we broke that story. And that's fair, fine. We are forever joined to her story. But what people don't realize is that we've never really ever published anything about her ever since. We've never shared her Facebook posts, and we've always kept a professional distance from her, just because, not because we thought she was lying, but just because we wanted to be, hey, look, we released this tape. We stand by the tape.
Sure.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Anything else, I don't know.
Yeah.
McKenna's a nice lady. I talk to her from time to time, but I'm not getting all up in her business about her going around with Sam Young or whoever it is she's going around with. Not my business.
Right.
Now, this latest fallout, which probably a lot of your viewers know about, with this poisoning story and the assault, and I mean, look, I knew some of that stuff a while ago. She texted me on the day she supposedly was poisoned. Said she was in the hospital. I didn't know about the other attacks until later. She didn't tell me about those contemporaneously with the supposed poisoning she did. And to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't really believe it when she told me. Yeah. But I mean, I also didn't call her a liar.
Yeah.
I felt bad for her, and I hoped at the time that she wouldn't go tell people about it, which she didn't for a while, I don't think.
I don't know.
I get the impression that she didn't really talk very much about it until more recently. That's the impression I get. But again, I wasn't getting involved. So, look, I mean, I don't believe her most recent claims of whatever it is she says happened earlier this year. But I think it's important, two things to remember. Number one, it doesn't change what Joseph Bishop admitted to, first of all, which is, by the way, a lot of people think he admitted to raping her. He never admitted to that, right? But he admitted to being inappropriate with a number of women. Yeah. Doesn't change that. And it is possible that she is telling the truth and is a scam artist.
Yeah. Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Those things, it doesn't have to be, oh, well, she's a scam artist, she must be lying about Joseph Bishop. Yeah. I don't buy that. Yeah. I don't know if all of her accusations against Joseph Bishop are true. Maybe they're embellished. I don't know. I truly feel something happened.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. But I think, as I sit here today, I think something happened between her and Joseph Bishop.
Any major, I don't know if you want to talk about this, stories or information you've rejected that has later come out and been proven that you say, well, we just weren't going to do it. It may have been valued now, but anything you...
I don't think we've had anything like that.
Okay.
We've definitely had stuff we've passed on.
Any mistakes you regret?
Oh, I'm sure. I don't know. I don't think we've ever made any major mistakes. Nothing like, oh, we better never do that again.
Boy,
one time we published something that somebody had posted on Reddit like a couple weeks before.
Oh.
And we posted it as, hey, we just leaked this document.
Oh.
It was a good document. I just didn't realize that it had already been, somebody else had put it out there.
That's hard to know.
I can't track, I can only know what I know. Now, okay. I remember doing a Google search to see if it was out there, and I must not have done a very good Google search because I think it could have been found. So, I mean, I did make a mistake. I didn't do a good enough Google search on that, so I could have done better. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, okay. Sure. We immediately issued a retraction and said, hey, this is still a good document. We are not the first ones to publish it.
Right.
The same thing happened with a video that we published. It was like this old church video, and it turns out that some YouTube channel already had it on their YouTube channel. Of course, it got a lot of traction because we put it out there. So, but we had to sort of say, oh, we weren't the first ones. I've told this before in other interviews, but there was something that we received that we didn't publish and never will. We received some bank statements of some of the apostles and personal bank statements. And, I mean, I'm not, they don't have $100 million in the bank, but they had a decent amount of money that ex-Mormons would love to see these bank statements. Sure. Let me just put it to you that way. The problem is that in the documents that we had, there was no clear indication where this money came from. There were no deposits from the church. So for all we know, this was money they saved up in their private life.
Sure.
When they were doing whatever their profession was. So because of that, because we couldn't tie it to the church, the institution, we kind of felt like it was a little too personal.
The name of your foundation is Truth and Transparency. So this is kind of a redundant question, but to our LDS viewers, we have some who watch still. What is the aim?
Yeah, great question.
What's the aim?
So in 2017, we started getting approached by people from other religions.
Oh.
Not a ton, but enough to where we were like, maybe there's a need. Hey, you know, we're successful with Mormon Leaks. Why not broaden our horizons? So in November of 2017, we launched a sister website to Mormon Leaks called Faith Leaks, which was the intention was to be Mormon Leaks for everybody else.
Wow.
And we haven't had, and then at the same time, we launched our foundation as sort of the parent operator of these two websites. We got 501c3 status so people could donate tax exempt and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So the Truth and Transparency Foundation in November of 17 was the nonprofit newsroom that operated Mormon Leaks and Faith Leaks.
Wow.
Okay. And we had not the same level of success with Faith Leaks to this day as Mormon Leaks, but we had some fleeting moments. We had some documents that made news, you know, mostly Jehovah's Witness related, some abuse documents. So we had some minor success there. And what we ended up doing as 2018 went on, you know, McKenna Denson happened and, you know, other things were happening. And we decided that we wanted to, you know, instead of just throwing documents up there with a brief, generic, sterile description of the document, and letting other news outlets write stories on it if they wanted, we wanted to start doing our own stories. And so we kind of really got serious about that in late 2018. And starting in 2019, we stopped publishing directly to Mormon Leaks and Faith Leaks. We will still post documents on those wikis, but we now publish articles written by either by myself or Ethan Dodge about things that we are releasing, and we link to the document in the article, just like any news outlet would, and it's on our Mormon Leaks wiki or whatever, right? And so we're writing the stories now, and we're doing investigative journalism. Oh, hey, we're still amateurs. We're still learning. Every day we're learning how to do this better and better.
Sure.
We're consulting with people every chance we get. How can we be better at what we're doing? And we're also doing this, by the way, in our free time. We have enough work on our plate for 40 hours a week, but we don't have the funding. So we have to work our jobs and do all this stuff in the side. You know, our biggest story that we've published so far under this new platform has been this recent story about, some of your people may have heard about it, Sterling Van Wagenen, who is the director of the Mormon Temple, most recent Mormon Temple videos. He was a BYU professor in the film department. He's been a producer or director on a number of major films that were financed by the church, like Work in the Glory, and I believe he was a producer on the recent Jane and Emma movie and stuff like this. And, you know, so it's, you know, he's also the co-founder of Sundance Film Festival with Robert Redford.
Wow.
Okay. And we got a tape from somebody who at the time was anonymous, but he's since come out. His name is Sean Escobar. And he gave us, he confronted Sterling about having abused him in the early 90s when he was 13 years old at a sleepover. And Sterling sang like a bird, to everybody's surprise, including Sean's. Sean didn't know what to expect, my understanding. We didn't know about the tape until it was already done. We didn't know he was going to do this. I didn't even know Sean. But from what I understand, Sean went into this confrontation not knowing what to expect, and Sterling opened up.
Wow.
Now, you know, admitted to everything he did to Sean, admitted to, you know, cheating on his wife throughout their entire marriage with men and women. He said he's bisexual. And that wasn't why we published it, by the way, because that's his personal life. But, you know, he committed a felony and never was punished for it.
Right.
Not only was he not punished for it, but he went on to enjoy what most would consider prestigious and, you know, lucrative employment with the church at BYU and in their film stuff, and being tapped to direct there are 3 new temple videos in 2014 or whatever.
Right.
So, it's like, so in the tape, one of the things that Sean Escobar keeps asking him is, are there any other victims? And Sterling steadfastly and believably, if you ask me, sounded very credible, especially because he's like confessing to all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Says, no. You were the first and the last who was a minor child, or did something against their will, whatever. And, well, I mean, statistically we know that's unlikely. It's possible, but statistically it's unlikely. And apparently a 14-year-old girl saw our story, went to her parents, and said, he did that to me when I was 9.
Whoa.
They went to the police. He pled guilty. I'm here in Salt Lake today because we just came from his sentencing hearing. He pled guilty. Today he was sentenced 6 years to life. And on top of that, the judge, who I give great kudos to, recommended to the parole board that he serve more than the minimum.
Wow.
Now, will that happen? I don't know. But I thought that was a great move by the judge. The victim and her mother spoke. The mother spoke a prepared statement. The victim got up and had her sister read a statement for her on her behalf because she couldn't do it. Powerful statements. Wow. Powerful statements. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house except for Sterling's.
Wow.
I watched him pretty closely. He showed very little emotion. It was very emotional.
Wow.
And, that girl's bravery to come forward like that is, I can't even imagine it, And, for us to have played a role in that, small role, because look, she had to come forward.
Sure.
She shouldered this burden, not us. But we played a small role, and it feels good that our work had that kind of a payoff.
Ryan, share verbally with our audience where to go to see these things and support your 501c3 to give you guys more. I think, just personally, you've always been since 2016, but you're on the cusp. This world is not taking it anymore.
Yeah.
You're on the cusp of breaking it wide open, and I look forward to that. So that brick and mortar religion will fall.
Yeah.
So what is it? Tell our audience.
Truthandtransparency.org would be our main website. You can see our articles there. There is a donate button. I hate, this. I wish I was better at asking for money because maybe we'd have a little bit more.
Yeah.
We do need money.
Yeah.
We don't need money for us to get paid. I mean, we would love it if somebody wants to come and throw a couple $1 million at us. We can turn this into a full-time job. But right now, in the short term, we need money to take care of our short-term needs, which are, website. The website costs more than people realize.
Sure.
Not that it doesn't bankrupt us, but it's not like $50 either. And just, for us to be able to come to sentencing hearings like this and be able to live tweet. And, we have, had to make little trips here and there, which up to now, thankfully, we've had the money to do. But the money is not an endless pit. And so we do need funds. And $5, I don't know if it lets you do $1, but if it lets you do $1, and you want to give $1, whatever it is. I mean, we are grateful for every penny, and if recurring is what helps, we have I don't know how many, I haven't looked recently, but we have a decent number of recurring donations, and some of them are like $5.
Sure.
That's fine. Like, man, if somebody does a recurring donation of $5, they don't realize like how big that is.
Yeah.
Because it starts to add up.
Sure.
And so, anything that people can help with is great.
We're going to wrap up this hour with Ryan McKnight. We're going to go to our third hour, our last part, and for next week. But one thing I want to throw at you, I'm just thinking of it. We have a friend of ours. She and her husband started a thing called Check My Church.
Okay.
And she gets stuff sent to her. And, I hope that your faith segment can somehow continue because she gets stuff sent.
Yeah.
These pastors are bastards.
We would love to work with her.
Oh, wow. I have to put you in touch with that.
We would love to work with her.
Yeah. Really appreciate it. You guys join us next week. here on Heart of the Matter.